This is the podcast for broadcast. The Sound Off Podcast with Matt Kendall.
This week I speak with Nat and Drew from 103.5 QMFM in Vancouver. They've been in the market for over 15 years. They've also been at a few radio stations that started with Z95.3, multiple brands that landed on that frequency, including Crave and Virgin, and then later they shifted to 103.5 QMFM. Changes happened as a result of programming and stations being bought, sold, or swapped, and throughout the uncertainty, they've managed to weather the storm and grow their show. And this, by the way, is a podcast first. It's actually the first time we've had more than one guest on at the same time. Technically, well, they made it work.
So we, thanks to the crack production staff here at Bell Media, led by John Bolwitz, but not to be left out, the wonderful Joey Arsenault. Woo! They have rigged up a deal where my phone is plugged into the board and we're just using the mics and headphones through the board.
We recorded this on a Friday, moments after they had wrapped up their show for the week. I caught up with Nat and Drew via FaceTime from the studios of 103.5 QMFM in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. Big time.
So when did Nat and Drew...
Thank you, Joey. Sorry, I was just saying goodbye to our producer who was leaving. But now it's just us, and you have our undivided attention.
So when did you two first meet?
Which makes sense. That laugh just made it sound so
It means
ominous.
a couple of different things.
It's a couple different things. We met before we worked together, but we met at a club.
We did not go home together.
We did not go home.
Very separate.
No. Drew didn't like me when he first met me, but basically, essentially, the short version is a friend of Drew's. I worked with her, and he came to a club that we were at in Toronto.
And that's when I first hated Nat.
That's
when I first hated Nat was, and then it was probably maybe 2 years after that, we both landed in Vancouver at about the same time. Mm-hmm. Nat started off doing mornings and I was doing afternoons. And then about 4 months after that arrangement, I moved into mornings full time. And I was 15 and a half beautiful years ago.
Still doesn't like me.
I've learned to tolerate her a little bit in small doses.
Yeah, but that's it. But he's very judgy. I don't know if you know that about him, but Drew Savage, very judgy. Just quote me on that.
Usually my judgment's very on point.
Yeah.
Why did you not like her? What did she do to upset you?
Oh my gosh, okay.
I thought there was a lot going on. You meet somebody in a club and you just get a vibe that there's a lot happening there.
Okay, tell the real story.
You were having a fight with your boyfriend.
I was being very dramatic. Yeah. I had a very dramatic boyfriend at the time, and I was very dramatic. So I think when Drew was first introduced to me, I probably wasn't my really kind, generous self, and I was in the midst of drama, Matt. So that's why. So it was kind of just a really bad first impression.
So Drew has these words running through his head when he first meets you, and that's, "She should be with me."
Not really.
Not really.
Just more like she's a lot.
There was just, it was the situation, it was the circumstance, I think, because we did meet one other time before we started working together, and it went much more smoothly than that first time.
Yeah, and then when he started working, I think we did like a social drink, but again, I was doing mornings, he was doing afternoons. I literally landed in Vancouver 2 weeks before him, but we were hired by Eric Samuels, the same person. He just came 2 weeks later, but just for different day parts. So we met for a drink, and then literally we worked together for when my current co-host at the time, he went on holidays and Drew filled in, and then we worked together and got along really well. Famously, even.
Famous.
We got along infamously.
I'm glad you mentioned the name Eric Samuels because he was such an instrumental part at the Bear in Edmonton. And then in 1996, he announces he's leaving and going to Vancouver. And, anytime you can leave Edmonton to go to Vancouver, it's a good thing, I think. So what was it like working with Eric Samuels?
There was so much magic. I mean, literally
on all levels. Yeah, on all levels.
JJ gave me my first break in Toronto. I was traffic and I was co-hosting, but kind of, very much surveillance type of announcer. Eric gave me my shot at mornings. So, and Eric was the one that put us together.
Yeah, Eric. I'm not here if it's not for Eric, and then my whole life literally is completely different. I met my wife here. I met my wife at the radio station we started at here in Vancouver. Like, my whole life is different if I don't get this job. And I'm a little surprised that Eric even called me because I had declined 2 other opportunities that Eric had presented to me previously. So the fact that he even called me a third time was a small miracle. And when this time it was what was then Z95 for afternoons, that was a no-brainer. So, yeah, awesome. He was huge.
What were the two opportunities you turned down?
Winnipeg.
Please don't take this personally, Matt, but it was first Winnipeg and then second Winnipeg. But it really had very little to do with Winnipeg itself. I was doing mornings in London, Ontario at the time, and I really, really liked my life there a lot, and was doing well, and all things were good. And I was looking for a larger market jump than what that was. I wanted to go to a larger market if I was going to leave a job and a situation and a life that I was enjoying so much in London at the time.
So, Nat, how did you get to Vancouver?
So what happened was JJ left. I think JJ went to the Q107 or something. Eric came in, but sometime it's sort of in the interim of that, I had decided that I was doing afternoon drive on the mix, and I was doing traffic and co-hosting. But I also, a TV opportunity came up for Rogers.
Bright lights.
Community television, bright lights.
moderately bright lights.
It was a little talk show called Daytime. And you did so I originally thought that I could do both. I could do the talk show community television and do afternoon drive. And Standard was totally cool with it. But Rogers was the cable company and the obviously radio and stuff and whatever. They were like, no, you can't do both. And I decided, I'm like, oh, you know what? I kind of want to take a shot at doing TV. I had done TV kind of a little bit in Kingston. So I decided to leave. But in the interim, when I'd already announced my departure, Eric had come and shown up as the new PD in Toronto. And I ended up having to stay a little bit longer to get them through a hump as they were making some hiring changes. And so we sort of stayed in touch. And then eventually when he was looking to change up some things in Vancouver, he called me.
And for anybody who knows what was going on at 99.9, the mix in Toronto, it was perpetual changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally was.
There was a lot of mixing.
They had a lot of, it was so funny because I remember when I first started there, Rob Christie was doing mornings. And I think he always wrote on the music sheets, an 8 would be great. They were so close to an 8 share. And I think in my time at the mix went from almost an 8 to, in those couple of years, there was so much change. It had gone down to, it might have been a 4 or something or whatever. And I'm like, oh, the days of maybe 8. But there was a ton of change. And so Rob Christie was, given what do you call it in radio? The thing that happens all the time? I mean, aspiring, but
for the future endeavored,
packaged
changed, making a change.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's not a golden handshake, is it?
Don't think so.
No, you don't get a watch. You don't get but
No.
But he got fired, and then I'm not sure how much. I've never done a podcast, Matt, so I'm not sure how many things to say. So this could get wow, she's saying way too much.
No, it's fine. We can always edit it out later, right? Okay. And just pretend it never happened or it was never said.
Except this exact section is going to make the podcast.
This is the only thing. This is the only thing.
We're fact-checking this as we go because I've got the memory of an elephant and everything does check out.
Okay.
All right.
It was almost an 8 and it did go to a 4 and it was really the result of too many changes.
Yeah.
But
congratulations, Nat.
Yes.
Excellent recall.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Z95 was a station that Standard bought, and you came in, and it just had these fantastic numbers and did really, really well.
And then we just squashed them. We came on board, and we just drove those numbers into the ground.
That's not true, is it?
You know what? There was a bunch of music changes that happened because literally when we showed up, it was the summer of 2003, August 2003, and we were playing 50 Cent. And then was it November, we were playing Don Henley?
No, I think it was February of 2004.
Okay.
That we changed from the very first week I was on Zed, the positioning statement was today's best music. And then a week or two later, it was Vancouver's #1 hit music station. Mm-hmm. And then about 5 or 6 months after that, it was Your Music, Your Zed. So there was a lot of change happening. That was the peak of the Jack brand. Jack was just everywhere in Vancouver and was massive. And I think a lot of other traditionally formatted radio stations were trying to figure out how to respond to that. And Zed was a station that had huge legacy in terms of massive numbers. And they had dropped a little bit, I think, over the course of the year before we arrived, and they were trying to reinvigorate and do some different things. But, things just kept declining. Yeah. And so they tried to age Zed and make it a little more appealing to older listeners, like the people who grew up with Zed when they were, teens and early 20s, and now they're in their 30s or whatnot. I think they were trying to make it a little more appealing to them and to kind of incorporate some of the brand values of what Jack was. It was just, I remember one morning we went from literally like Darude's Sandstorm to Van Halen, Why Can't This Be Love? And it's like, this just is not, this is not what Zed is. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a tough time. A lot of people were figuring out a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'm going to say that in radio, when you try something new like that, either the people who are making the programming decisions just don't know what they're doing, or if it works out, they're the most innovative programmers ever.
Right, sure.
Everything is sort of swinging for the fences when it comes to programming.
And I think we panic. Like, I think there's a real, and it depends on, I guess, like, who's above you. You're a programmer, but you've got somebody above you yelling in your ear that, like, you've been on a slide for 4 months or 6 months or whatever it is, and look at this station that's just come on and they're super hot, and then you see so somebody, even if you don't believe the directive, you got to sell it to everybody that's working for you, right? Is like, this is going to be the next great thing, and yeah, we got Jack over here, but we can, we're going to play Van Halen, we're going to play Darude, and like, and we're gonna be a smash.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting perspective to have been on a brand that was so big and then had started its decline just before we got there, and then to go through that process of how do we revive this brand, how do we make it back, how do we bring it back, and then to be a part of that ride. Like, there were some down times on 95.3, and that frequency went through a number of different brand incarnations until the point where we finally were part of a resurgence again, and the show really did start to click, and the station was sounding great. Like, that whole journey was pretty crazy and pretty rare to get kind of that, full scope of the process.
But you guys aren't really talking about the amount of pressure you guys were under as a morning show to perform, because it got a little bit nuts.
Well, it's funny because I don't really remember it. I don't remember it being nuts. Like, I don't remember feeling the pressure. I do remember knowing when, well, both Drew and I knew when we were going to get fired, when they decided that, the whole rebranding, changing the Z into the Your Music, Your Life, or whatever. What was it called?
It was Crave. It was the music that moves you, or something like that.
So when they were going from Z to Crave, and they decided to blow out most of the staff, and Drew and I were victims of that. You could see when changes were coming because there were all these top level meetings, and we would walk by. It felt like we would walk by, all these high up managers in a room with glass windows, and we'd walk by and they'd just kind of like close the blinds. It was just like, take your meetings where you're going to fire us, like go somewhere else, like go off site. And then the person that was doing middays at the time, she knew what was happening, like the night before it happened, because like a friend of hers was at the launch party.
Yeah, well, Kelly Grant knew somebody who worked at the province, and they had taken ads out. The radio station had taken out ads to promote Crave, and her friend said, "What's Crave?" And she's like, "I don't know." she called us, and we're like, "Well, I guess tomorrow's the day."
Yeah,
I guess tomorrow's the day. So, yes, lots going on.
Help me out with this drama, because wasn't there a reply all email that went out that was going to announce your termination, and then you were gone for 3 weeks, and then you were back after 3 weeks? You guys replaced yourselves. Is that true?
That we did replace ourselves. We were let go in a meeting, and well, it was funny because Nat at the time was doing the show remotely from Toronto that day. And so I was in the Vancouver studio, Nat was in Toronto, and we knew it was coming, and I could see, I love you, Eric, but I could see Eric on the security camera waiting in the jock lounge. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm first. So Nat was like, you were going to go get something to eat because you figured you were after me.
Yeah, no. So I had a sandwich in the fridge. Yeah. I was like, and so I was at the 2 St. Clair West. I was at the 99 building, doing on ISDN, and so Drew was going to get fired. I was going to go eat a sandwich, and then I was going to get fired. Yeah. But
so I go, we'll talk to you in a half an hour. Yeah. We'll compare notes, except that's not exactly how it went down. I did go into Gary Russell's office with Eric at the time, but you weren't able to go get your sandwich.
No, I'm walking down the hall to get my sandwich, and Ian Lurie, who was like the CFO or whatever of Standard, is walking down the hall, and I'm like, hey, Ian. He's like, Nat, I have to talk to you. And it's my terrible South African. And I'm like, oh, okay, what? Like, still not cluing in that I'm going to get fired. And then he didn't want to fire me. Like, he was so angry that he had to fire me. But like, somebody gave him a directive. He's like, I think, there's some changes. I don't want to be doing this. And I'm like, well, I want my sandwich. So it was it was the weirdest firing, because he was just like, okay, I'm really sorry. And he just handed me a letter. And then I'm like, do you need me to clear my stuff out? What should I do? And he's like, oh, if you want to just, take your time.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, good, because I have a sandwich.
That's very important.
It's so important.
I think really, though, you want to talk about the impact that social media has had on radio. I honestly think if this had happened 6 months before or even 6 months later than it did, it was June 2007, and Facebook was really just exploding at the time. And I think a lot of longtime terrestrial radio executives just didn't know how to respond to it. And there was a huge Facebook outcry. And like, that happens so often now. And I almost feel bad and guilty when I see that happening, because that happens a lot now when radio stations make changes. And it happened then. And I just don't think they knew how to respond to that. And because they were moving to a format, also, they weren't like going alt rock or thrash metal or anything like that. Like, they were still trying to attract the same target demographic. So I think they may have ultimately felt like, holy cow, there's an outcry here on this new thing that we don't really understand. And we're doing kind of a similar format anyway. Let's just bring them back. Mm-hmm. At least that's out. It feels weird to say outside looking in, because I was a participant, but that's always kind of how I've perceived it.
And what's the best part of this is that they fired us and they had no plan. Like, they thought that getting rid of us was the better alternative. Like, there was nothing. Like, they were like, we'll go with nothing.
That always feels good, doesn't it?
It's like they didn't have anybody they'd hired yet, which is so kind of crazy. And it worked out well for us. But so we literally got a call. It was about a week later. Yeah. And then I went to Gary's, because I was still in Toronto. So Drew went down to Horseshoe Way, where the station is, and I went into the offices of Gary Russell and Eric Samuels, and I went into Gary Slate's office and sat there awkwardly. And we had a conference call.
Yeah. It was, but it's so weird, because this just all feels like such ancient history.
So
like, it's 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
But it's weird, because from time to time, not as often anymore, but people will still mention it to us. Like, it's just like people that we meet, whether we're doing station events or whatever, people will refer to that time. Mm-hmm. But it's 12 years ago now. Like, it's wild how much has changed since that time.
Yeah.
In defense of all the people that you mentioned who had to do the firings, they didn't do a lot of that stuff. To let people go and to restructure, there's an entire process. But back then, and especially at Standard Radio, firing people was not something they did. They always made great hires, and most of the brands were very successful. And so to have, stations that would hemorrhage ratings, it was very rare. And then you just mentioned the social media aspect of the whole thing. It was a proverbial shitstorm. And it was on the message boards, and I remember watching it and going, because I was working at Standard as well, and I think I, leaned across the hallway and I said, what's plan B on this? and there was no plan B.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's kind of funny to Drew's point. Like, when whatever we get fired now, and there's an outcry of some semblance or whatever, if there is, like, nobody cares. Whatever. You know what? Because people move on, and we totally get that. But again, it was just timing. We were just so lucky with timing. Yeah. We were unlucky in the sense that we came to Zed when they were going through a major change, but we kind of bounced back.
But I think we're all formed by that experience. Like, it's weird. It was a wild time. It was a crazy time. But I actually love all of the story, and I love how it's impacted and influenced who we are and what the show is and all that stuff. Because I think after that process, I think we learned to let go of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And really started to move forward in some pretty significant ways.
Yeah. So, like, once and I think most people that work in radio, if you're listening and you aspire to work in radio, here's the deal. You will be fired at some point. Yeah. Some of us have been fired a couple times. What you do usually is, what I did was order Swiss Chalet and watch Bridget Jones's Diary and have one good cry and then move on. Yeah. It is what it is.
Is that leg or breast on the chicken?
You know what? I'm a vegetarian now, but it was chicken breast with so much sauce. So, like,
sauce is good.
Always the extra sauce.
Now that's a good tip. By the way, if we're ordering chicken, I'm a double leg guy. And if we can, it's going to be St. Hubert Barbecue over Swiss Chalet any day. And yes, it is always about the sauce. In just a second, more on some of the changes they had to endure, and we find out why they love Vancouver and how much they adore getting up at 3 a.m. Just kidding. They don't. There was also some sales going on. So Astral and Bell, and then there was a flip between radio stations. I mean, there was a whole lot more that you had to deal with in the years that came after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we were Virgin. Yeah, we were Virgin for a while.
We were Crave for a while.
Crave.
And then we were Virgin for a while. Even we don't remember Crave, apparently.
And Ronnie Stanton was our program director for about 6 years, 5 years, something like that.
I think Ronnie came in the fall of 2008. We were still Crave when Ronnie arrived at the radio station. And then it was in January of 2009, 95.3 became a Virgin station.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the secret to keeping your show going through all these changes?
We don't know how to do anything else. I think that's part of it is this is all we've ever done. And then part of it is sort of how we sort of started out as a team like 15-ish years ago now. We started it like when we have a larger team now, but when we started, it was just Drew and I. So it really was 50-50. And now we have all these awesome other people on our show. So, we have Erin Davis, who's the West Coast Erin Davis.
Important to clarify.
Yeah, I know in Toronto, like there was Erin there, but our Erin Davis, who's a fantastic broadcaster and has been around for a long time and is awesome, has been with us for a long time. And then Joey Arsenault is our producer, and we have young Vic Sahi, who's our assistant producer. So we have all these people that have come on board at different times throughout the last 15 years, but it started with Drew and I just kind of sitting down as like, we're a partnership and we're 50-50 and we're going to make this work. And if either one of us is ever really uncomfortable with doing something on the air, we won't do it. And we respect that. And
it's all been just so much fun.
Yeah.
I think at the end of it, like, it's fun. Like when you get up at a ridiculous time of the day, and it sucks to get up at that time of the day, but as soon as you get to work, you're going to have fun, and you're going to have fun with people that you know and you love and are a huge part of your life. And the larger cast has a lot to do with that. Scott Shantz was a big part of our show for the better part of a decade. And then he moved on about 1.5 years, 2 years ago almost now. And that's when Joey and Vic kind of came in, and Erin for such a long time and such a vital part of the show. I mean, it's the collective, it's the experience of making what we think is great radio. We hope it's great radio. We have fun creating whatever radio it is. And when you have that kind of good creative fun every day, I mean, why would you want to do anything else?
And I think it's also, like we really kind of learned a lesson somewhere along the road, like the way, and I think Ronnie was kind of instrumental in this, is like figuring out who we are each as broadcasters. Like knowing like that, Drew will have strengths that I don't have. And I need to be okay with that, because I will have strengths that he doesn't have, but we put them together. And the same with Erin. And the same now with the two newest additions to our show, both Joey and Vic. We all figure out, we each have a different role to play. It's very much a team, and there are different roles, but you can get really caught up in, and I think I certainly did when I was first starting out, of like, oh no, I didn't get the funny. Like, you know what I mean? Like, right. I'm not having a good day and whatever, but it doesn't really matter when you are with good people and you want, it's not about just you succeeding. It's about like your whole team succeeding. And some days you'll get the funny, and some days, some breaks you get the funny, some breaks you don't. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of sort of, I think, a little like a very brief version of our philosophy, as I just made it up just now.
I sign off on it, though.
Thank you.
I concur.
Thank you.
I will co-sign that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get a team of people who are around, who are contributing to your show and being a part of it, what are you doing a little bit more of, and what are you doing a little bit less of? Because I know that the first inclination when anybody gets a staff to work with to produce a morning show, they want to do everything. We want to do YouTube. We want to be out and about. We want to do Instagram. We want to tell stories. We want to have extra accounts. We want to do all these things. It can get a little bit too crazy. So what are you doing a little bit less of that you say, we just don't need this as a part of our brand folder anymore?
I think, for better or for worse, I think the show is primarily comprised of conversations. Like I would say one of the things we do less of than we used to do are bits. Mm-hmm. Like we've done like 1 million different things over the years, whether it's like job swap, where we swap jobs with a listener, There was the Nat Drew ad agency where we made terrible commercials for small businesses. My mom was a movie reviewer on the show for a little while. We've done different things over the years to, traditional radio morning show benchmark bits. Mm-hmm. And I think we do less of those. It's more conversation. Can we find something in this material? Does this material relate? Is it today? Is there context for this material? And how, as a group, can we react to this and make sure that there's different takes, different opinions, different feelings about this material? And if we think there's enough there in the seed, then I think we just kind of nurture it and hope that it blossoms into something good.
I think we figured out what our strengths were, and some of those benchmarks were okay, and some were better than others, but they weren't our strength. And some shows will do things like that, and they will just be better at it than we can be. But we're really good at having conversations and interesting conversations. So that's pretty much
and
what
hopefully authentic conversations too. I mean, that's always the goal, is to just be real and be you. Maybe you're turning the volume up on some stuff here and there, but I mean, be you. And I think that's the important part of identifying strengths amongst the cast of a show, who is who, mm-hmm. and what can they bring, and what are their reactions going to be. But try to have very real conversation that's authentic. You want it to this is so cliche, but you want it to feel like it's the dinner party, because I think people enjoy going to those kinds of things. So if you can provide that environment in the morning, then giddy up.
I think you're onto something, because we're becoming more conversational in radio, and I think that has to do with podcast. I think when it comes to Instagram, they're already ditching likes. We're going to be moving more towards shares. And also in the podcast world, it's less about the downloads, and it's going to be more about the consumption of a podcast. And if people made it to where we are in this podcast, sometime around minute 25 or 27.
What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
You people have been so invigorating so far that we're going to get at least 110% consumption.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, wow.
Sounds like my mom's going to listen to it twice.
Absolutely. Have either one of you ever taken a long break from the show? We need a break. We're going to break up 6 weeks, a month.
Interestingly enough, about 3 weeks after, so we moved from, as part of the sale from Bell, when Bell acquired Astral, and we transitioned from 95.3, which was one of the properties that Bell had to sign off, or sell off rather, to adhere to the CRTC regulations. So Bell decided they wanted to keep our morning show and moved us to QMFM, which has been a great move. So that happened. We moved here in April of 2014, and my wife was pregnant with our second baby at the time. And I think about 3 weeks after we started at this brand new radio station, after 2 years of uncertainty, because the Bell Astral deal took a while to get done, about 3 or 4 weeks after we got here, I was like, I think I want to take a break when my baby's born. So that July, I basically took the month of July off that very first year, and literally just a couple of months after we started here at QMFM. So that was me. Mm-hmm. I don't remember you stepping away for anything.
No, I'm a workhorse. Matt, I'll just never quit. I love it. And if I could, I'd give back my holidays.
Really?
You should see Drew, because I know you don't know me very well. Drew is, you can't breathe.
I can't breathe, because that is the exact opposite of reality.
I've never taken a big break, though. No.
The moment Nat wins $50 in a scratch lottery ticket, she'll quit.
I'm out. Bad with money. I don't know how long that 50 will last me, but I'm done. Yeah. So Drew, I thought you were actually gone for almost 6 weeks. Was it? It
was 5, maybe 5, and it wasn't much more than a month.
Yeah. So just that, and then so that's been about it. But it certainly seems like in radio, and maybe just in businesses in general, you hear a lot more people, sort of taking leaves to sort of reassess. And this is I love my job so much. In all seriousness, I love it. The hours have always been hard. I do fantasize about a leave from time to time, because I have just never really adjusted to getting up at just after 4 o'clock in the morning. It's just, people are like, oh, you've been doing it so long, you must be used to it. Nope.
That's one of the most maddening aspects of the job, is when somebody who doesn't do your schedule tells you what your schedule must be like.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, regardless of what you do for a living, if you've got a non-traditional work schedule, I'm sure that gets under everybody's skin. But it's just no, I haven't gotten used to it.
I hate it. I cry every time my alarm goes off. I cry just a tiny bit, a little soft sobs to not wake up my husband. Yeah. I'm oh, I can't.
Even people who are early birds don't get up at 4 a.m.
No.
That's 5 a.m. minimum.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe soon, Matt. Maybe soon I can take a leave.
How much do you both love Vancouver?
I love Vancouver. I came to Vancouver. It was like my first grown-up adult holiday, really by myself. It was my boyfriend, who's now my husband, but we were like 22 years old. And I walked around this city and I went, I want to work here. There's a city in Canada that has palm trees. I loved it so much. And I was still in school at the time. I was going to Humber College, so shout out Humber. And
Word.
And I literally started sending tapes, like cassette tapes, because this is the 90s. And I got an offer for part-time in Victoria to do part-time news.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I can't remember the station. And but I'm like, I guess I really can't move my entire life to make whatever, $10 an hour for about 10 hours.
Why not? You said you were bad with money.
Yeah,
why not?
But yeah, so I loved it. And it was so funny that I'd done a few Vancouver trips, and my husband and I got married. We kind of eloped to Vancouver. We got married, if anybody, for those that know the city, in Stanley Park at the Tea House. And literally a year later, the 1 year anniversary of getting married, I got the offer from Eric to come move to Vancouver. So I was like, happy anniversary, honey. I love you so much. By the way, I have a full-time awesome job offer in Vancouver, and you're starting up a business in Toronto. So how's that going to go? So, and we made it work. We were back and forth and ISDN lines and the whole bit and stuff, but I love it here.
How about you, Drew?
It's pretty good.
Excellent.
All right.
I got 2 questions left.
Okay.
Do you listen to any podcasts?
Sound off. So I'm just sort of getting into podcasts, but I have listened to a few. Thunder Bay, which was a recommendation, and it just completely blew my mind. It was just about the crime and things that are happening in Thunder Bay and stuff that's not getting, seems like, taken seriously by local authorities. It was amazing. This American Life, which I think a lot of people know of, and 99% Invisible I just started listening to, which is super cool. It's about things that you would never think of, like how a shopping mall, gets developed, and you think, well, that's not going to be interesting, but it is. I think the host is Roman Mars. It's so fantastic.
And I would like to recommend Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Pritchard, which does a deep dive every week on historical moments in WWE history. You should hear the story of how the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, got his nickname.
Jeez.
That's great.
That does.
That's really, really good.
Does sound compelling.
Like, holy cow.
Hey, guys, everybody's got a price.
For the $1 Million Man.
Whatever happened to that guy who broke up with Nat that night in the bar?
Oh my gosh. We didn't break up. We just had a lot of drama for a while. And he lives in Europe. We're good friends, but we were always, we were always just better friends.
Meant to be friends.
We were friends, and then we were together, and then we're just friends.
Yeah, we've all had one of those relationships where one person wanted it a little bit more, but we're going to keep it friends, right?
That wasn't me, Matt. That wasn't me.
I promised you I'd get you out of here on time, and look at that. I've managed to do it. Thank you very much for being a part of the Sound Off podcast.
Really appreciate the invitation. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. It was super fun.
Thanks for listening to the Sound Off podcast. Find us online at soundoffpodcast.com and connect with us wherever great social media is housed. The show is imaged using the sounds from Core Image Studios.
Written and hosted by Matt Kundle.
A production of the Sound Off Media Company.